And when I got home, this character, Chauncey, came to me. One of the things I did on one of the revisions was, after I had written the book, I felt like I knew Chauncey a whole lot better than when I started the book. And so I started to think about him when he was young. And so I went in and I put in all these little interludes that told you, the reader, about his life when he was coming up and how he got to be the man that he turns out to be in this novel. And so I'm going to read one of those little interludes. I looked toward the basketball court where 6 young men ran up and down the court so fast that I wished that I had the coordination and height to play with them. I heard the rhythmic sound of the basketball hitting the pavement, then the clinging of the metal nets as the basketball swooshed through. I closed my eyes and imagined that I was in the middle of Harlem, witnessing a game of New York street ball like I had seen on television. But, well, when I opened my eyes, well, that's when I saw him. He was wearing a nondescript white t-shirt and baggy shorts. He looked like a midget among a forest of tall trees. I found myself gazing at only him, and when he looked in my direction, an aggressively bright sun stung his golden brown face. His eyes sparkled like a cold glass of ginger ale. From a distance, his body looked compact, without an ounce of fat. One of his teammates shouted for him to shoot, and the ball flew from his hand and arched high in the air before hitting nothing but net. I heard a guy say, "I guess you can play D. I heard they can shoot some hoops down in Georgia." Another echoed, "Your shot is so sweet, from now on we're going to call you Sweet D." After a few more laps up and down the court, Sweet D stopped his stride and looked at me. He smiled as he twirled the burnt orange ball on the tip of his finger, and I knew that somehow he would become an important part of my life. Say a Little Prayer is just a book about pursuing your dream and solidifying your faith. It also deals a little bit with some of the discrimination that goes on in the church. It also talks a lot about the mega churches and if we've lost what we've lost by not having so many small churches like we used to.
When not writing, Lynn Harris enjoys watching sports, listening to music, and now teaching. He said he's a writer who writes stories that appeal to anybody who likes to read, and will continue writing in the genre he's in.
No, I'm going to write the stories that talk about my community and my people. I can't write anything that I'm not passionate about.
In March of 1923, Wilbur and Artie Halyard had a vision of better housing opportunities and a higher standard of living for Milwaukee's Negro community. Out of that great vision came the Columbia Building and Loan Association, which today, after relocating a number of times, is simply known as the Columbia Savings and Loan Association.
Take me back to 1924 and tell me how Columbia Savings and Loan came to be.
Well, history has it that Mr. Halyard, who is from Bamberg, South Carolina, I believe, moved to Beloit. And later he did some investigation into Milwaukee and saw the housing condition for African Americans during the early 1920s. He spoke with political figures in Beloit, and he and I believe it was the governor or the mayor wrote a letter to the governor here introducing Mr. Halyard to Milwaukee and talking about the housing condition of our people. And he was a man who was interested in making a difference in improving that.
Starting from scratch, the Halyards had to first get a charter, find others who believed in their dream, and at the same time persevere despite being bamboozled out of $500.
One thing they had to do was get capital. He needed to raise, or at least get pledges that he could raise $50,000 worth of capital, which he did. And after that, he made application for a charter. He needed some legal help, so that's where this attorney got involved. And for some reason or another, he didn't get that charter. He learned with much surprise that it only cost $10 instead of the $500 that they paid the lawyer. But nevertheless, that didn't stop him. He was successful in doing what he set out to do.
The Great Depression, late 20s, early 30s, took out a lot of institutions, yet Columbia was one of those that not only stayed around, but kind of existed until it could thrive again. Talk about that time in history.
That was an era that was a challenge for the banking institutions as well as the whole economy, the Great Depression. And yes, you're absolutely correct. A number of institutions didn't survive that era. Columbia did. I would have to say, well, I had the privilege of working with Mrs. Halyard, Mr. Halyard's widow, after I came aboard. And she informed me that they didn't take salaries for themselves, which is, I guess, a remarkable thing. That's how dedicated they were to making certain that this institution survived.
Columbia was one of the first lenders to a lot of black churches in this community. I guess it was a niche market that they kind of seized upon.
The Halyards, as many of us are today, were church people. And I grew up in the church, and many of them, and I'd never seen a black church fail during my time. That doesn't mean some have not. So when the Halyards came on board, they financed churches, parsonages for churches, and when I came on board in 1974, that opportunity presented itself again for Columbia to be very instrumental in helping what I would call storefront. Milwaukee had a good number of storefront churches. Over the years, we have financed, and we still do that today, we have financed 50 plus 60 churches probably, and we have never had to repossess one. So that's a good, I think that's a good business niche to be a part of.
Let's go back to the 1970s when Columbia was an integral player in the creation of Halyard Park. How did that come to be?
A developer who is a realtor in town, a very successful realtor. United Realty was headed by Mr. Beachy O. Brooks. And Mr. Brooks, in consulting with the Department of City Development in the mid-70s, thought it would be a good idea to develop Halyard Park, an area that was named in honor of Mr. Halyard for the work that he did in the community. Mr. Brooks decided that it would be a good idea to build new, modern, suburban-style homes in that area. He got the approval from the Department of City Development to redevelop that. And he had some problems getting other financial institutions to agree to make loans in that area. So having been denied an opportunity to get financing from other institutions, Beachy approached Columbia, and we looked at his proposal and told him how we would finance properties for Halyard Park.
You're now in a brand new location, replete with drive-throughs. Talk about the vision that you have for this institution and how you might be expanding some of the products and services that you offer.
Let me start by saying why we decided to make this move. We have outlived and outgrown our present facility at 2000 West Fond du Lac Avenue. We want to expand and provide more services to our community. Right now, Columbia has concentrated on providing a safe place for people to save, as well as provide home loans for folks to buy, for families, I should say, to buy homes for themselves. And we have done that, I think, pretty well over the years. But we're in a new era of financial services today. And it's going to require more people, a different facility to accommodate those people, a different facility equipped with the technology that we need to deliver services today.